Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 194, recorded live in my basement on Monday, March 31st, 2014. I am your host, Todd Klindt, welcoming you to my basement. Come on in, have a seat. Let's chat about some tech stuff for a while. It'll be fun. It'll be great. Got my friends here in the chat room. Got 15 or 20 of my closest friends in here, and got you guys on the recording. So thanks everybody for coming on in. This netcast was sponsored and promoted and encouraged and all that great stuff by my boss. And all the folks at Rackspace. They gave me that cool flag there, Rackspace, and all that. They made all this possible. So go on out to sharepoint.rackspace.com. Just go ahead and put that in your browser. It works with Internet Explorer. It works with Chrome. It works with Link. It works with Slipnear. All those crazy browsers. Go in there, and you can see all kinds of our great SharePoint content. We got videos and white papers, and you can find out about all the great things that we offer, consulting and training and all that good stuff. That's all at sharepoint.rackspace.com. So go on out, tell them Todd sent you. It'll be a good time, I promise. Production notes, we don't have a lot this week. The light's getting that better, though I think the lighting in the background last time looked pretty good. Had a couple of issues with the lights, but I've got that sorted out. But then I didn't take any notes or take any pictures, anything, so I went to set it all up this week, and I think we worked backwards. Lori in the chat room volunteered to fly up here and iron my curtains in the background, so I might have to find a different way to store all that. But we're getting there, folks. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate it. We're getting there. The only other production note that I had, and this I didn't notice until about 45 minutes ago, is that the video, for those of you that only have the audio, you're fine. You can ignore me for a minute. For those of you that watch the video on YouTube at youtube.com/ToddKlindtNetcast, or if you subscribe to the video feed or whatever, will notice that the title card for last week, which was 193, actually says 178. And that's because when I render all this video out, I've got a template that's got the audio in the background and the picture and all that kind of stuff, and I made that template off of 178. And normally I go in and change that front thing. Forgot to this week. So for the non-YouTube video, I'll probably re-render that out and fix that. For the YouTube video, I don't know that I will. We'll see. YouTube doesn't let you change URLs. Or it doesn't let you change videos for URL, so if I re-render it with the correct number and upload it, it'll goof things up, but we'll see. But I apologize for that. I've written down on a chalkboard 100 times. I will not forget to update the title card, so we should be good for next week. So thanks again for your patience there. Okay, so before we get too far into the meaty technical stuff, I had a couple fun things that I wanted to share. First was a picture that one of my coworkers sent around last week about something else, but it was just too adorable for me to not share. For those of you that are on the video, you can link it down in there, or maybe I'll try to be fancy and put the picture up in the video. We'll see about that. But it's a picture of a cat, and he's kind of frowning, and it says, to the tune of 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 little bugs in the code, 99 little bugs in the code, take one down, patch it around, 127 little bugs in the code. And that's exactly how I feel about patches in SharePoint. So anytime anybody says, from here on out, hey, that new cumulative update just came out, should I install it? I'm just going to send them a picture of this, send them a link to this picture. It's awesome. Like Jared in the chat room is saying, it's funny because it's true. That's absolutely the case. Another fun one that I wanted to share was a picture on Instagram. And I don't know, I might try to splice this one in, we'll see. But this was from Jeezy Ninja, and it's a video. So the caption says, the Todd Klindt Netcast, and a perfect example of why I'll never be able to watch the live feed. And it's got him using a Chromecast and casting my Netcast onto his TV, huge TV, and then as he's trying to watch his little kid sword fighting in front of it. So that's pretty awesome. But I think it's a fun video and all that, and thanks to GZ Ninja for sending that up to me. But I think there's a fun aspect of it, but there's a very practical, technical aspect of it, and I think the technical lesson is that this goes to show that any technology, no matter how pure and innocent that it is, in this case the Chromecast, that any technology, no matter how well-meaning it was, can be used for evil. And in this case, that evil is taking my ugly mug and throwing me up on a 60-inch TV. That's probably not what the inventors of the Chromecast or the TV had in mind, but that was a good one. So I did like that. Thanks to him for putting that up on Instagram for everybody to appreciate. And again, if I'm feeling ambitious when I render this out, I'll try to put those in line with the video. TechRev Merrill, good to see him in the chat room, is saying that he doesn't worry much about this patching. He just runs RTM on his servers. Nothing wrong with that, Merrill. We got the service pack coming out. I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but maybe find some time, slap a service pack on one of them servers, see how it treats you. Just throwing that out there. See how it is. All right, so now into some actual technical stuff, not just me throwing funny cat videos out to you. So one of the things that I have been meaning to blog forever and just have never done it, and I've actually got part of the article written, is how to do like a hot standby disaster recovery farm with SharePoint. And it's something that comes up all the time. I probably have this discussion with customers once a month, maybe more. And it's because SharePoint just doesn't handle the whole hot standby thing very well. It's not built into the product, so you always kind of find some way to wedge it in there. And this blog post from Sam Betts is a pretty good blog post. And again, it's like the one I was planning on writing, except much better graphics, about how to build the hot standby SharePoint farm. And so we're talking the farm that if you're in the context of Rackspace customers, if they've got all of their stuff in one of our data centers, we'll say the Dallas Fort Worth data center, and for whatever reason, and this is completely would never happen, but if that data center were to go offline, then how would we bring their stuff up immediately in our Chicago data center, something like that. And that's what this blog post talks about. So from a simple discussion, it comes down to basically this. You build two separate farms. So you have your primary farm and your recovery farm. Build them up exactly to the same patch level, exact same web apps. Your recovery farm doesn't have to have the same machines, because chances are, if you've got 5 servers in your production farm, you might only need 3 in your recovery farm because the expectations are going to be lower. The performance expectations aren't going to be there, things like that. But you do want to use all the same web apps. So, portal.contoso.com over here, portal.contoso.com over here, all the same web apps. And you want to use the same service accounts, because as we do the database part, those permissions are going to, be maintained to those database backups. So everything's just going to work better if you've got the same service accounts. And then you're going to want to make sure that your recovery farm is at the same patch level as your production farm. And that's one of those things that's easy when you do the install, but then you have to remember, as you patch your production farm, you need to patch your recovery farm, or else your databases won't restore. So that's kind of how you get SharePoint going. When I do this personally, I build content out in the recovery farm just to make sure everything works. When I create that web app, it's going to create a content database anyway, so I just throw a site collection in there, make sure everything works, make sure search works, all that kind of stuff. Just, kind of a gut check. You don't want to find out that stuff's not configured right when everything's exploding. So after you've done all that, then on the SQL side, on your production farm, what Sam does in his blog post, and what I normally do for customers too, is you set up log shipping, transaction log shipping. And then you have a SQL server on the recovery side that's taking those transaction log backups and then restoring them. And so that database is, constantly getting updated. Now, when you start doing this, you need to decide on some things. You want to have an SLA, or a service level agreement, in place. And that is going to do a couple of great things for you. Number one, it's going to set your business's expectations correctly. So if you're looking at having things failed over in 3 hours, that seems like a long time for them. And if it's not spelled out somewhere, then they're just not going to know. But if there's an SLA that they can look at that says the restore time objective is 3 hours, then when they start screaming, you can just say, hey, be patient, 3 hours. So the SLA does two things. It sets your customer's expectations correctly and kind of backs you up. But the other thing is it gives you something to plan towards, because nobody wants any downtime and nobody wants to lose any data. But for most of us, we don't have the budget for that. So the SLA gives you guidelines to kind of plan towards. So one of those things is the restore point objective, the RPO. And let's say your RPO is an hour. And what that means is that is the longest amount of time that you will ever lose data, potentially. So if somebody uploads a document and 30 minutes later your primary farm fails, if your RPO is 60 minutes, they might lose that document. They might not, but they might. If your RPO is an hour, 60 minutes, and they uploaded something 2 hours ago, then they will never lose it. RPO. So that's another one of the things you want to have set up in your SLAs, the restore point objective. But with that number, so let's say your RPO is 60 minutes, when you set your transaction log shipping up, that tells you how often you have to copy those transaction logs over. If your RPO is 60 minutes, well, then your transaction logs had better be shipping over to your recovery farm in some interval smaller than 60 minutes. So 30 minutes, whatever, and that's something that you're just going to have to play with a little bit. Your WAN link is going to dictate how often you can do that. What your churn rate is, how much change your databases have over a given amount of time is going to dictate that. But those are numbers you want to have set in stone somewhere so that you can try to work towards them. Or if you find out they're not achievable, then you can change them in your SLA. So he talks about that in here. He gets the content databases replicating over with log shipping. And then basically what happens is when things are going well, you don't do anything, those logs pop over. There's a job on the recovery farm side that's replaying them. So, they're being copied over every hour. They're being replayed back into those databases. And then in the unlikely event that something crashes, Brian LaLancette in the chat room is mentioning how the cloud solves everything, so we don't have to worry about that. That is absolutely true. You can take that to the bank. The cloud solves all your problems. But in the unlikely event, again, that there's a problem, then what you do is you change your DNS. So your DNS for portal.contoso.com is pointing to your production farm. You go in there. Hopefully your DNS is not hosted at the same place that your production farm is. But then you take your DNS and you point it to your recovery farm. All the same URLs. And in the chat room, they mentioned that you want to make sure that you have your TTL or your time to live set low. The time to live is a setting for your entire DNS zone that tells servers that cache DNS how long can I keep this record? What is the time to live for this record? And if you have that time to live as 24 hours, but then you're trying to switch over your stuff in less than an hour, well, that doesn't work. So you need to have the time to live on your DNS zone be shorter than your RTO, your restore time objective. But then when the disaster strikes, you go in, you change your DNS, you point it at your recovery farm. On the recovery farm, you bring all those databases online, you restore that last backup, transaction log backup, if it hasn't been restored already. You break log shipping, because at some point that other one's going to go back out, and you don't want things trying to replicate back across again. And then that will bring your content databases online. And I don't remember if he talks about it in here, but I always detach and reattach them to make sure everything gets synced up. And in theory, there's a whole bunch more steps to it, but from a high level, in theory, that will bring your content up in the other farm. You won't have lost anything. Your users can keep doing that kind of stuff. Now, one of the things that he kind of glosses over in here, and he doesn't say much about it, is service applications. And each and every service application, much like snowflakes, are different. They're all handled differently. So some of them you can, like manage metadata, for instance, you can replicate the database across, and then when you flip over and switch over to that recovery farm, bring that managed metadata database online, create a new managed metadata service app, point it to that database, and poof, everything just works. That's how that one works. Search, for instance, doesn't work that way because you've got your search indexes, things like that. So for customers, what I've done for them is one of two things. I've said, we can bring your admin database over, and not your admin, your search admin database, and that will maintain your settings. But when this comes online, we have to do a full crawl. And for some folks, that's okay. Search isn't a huge deal to them, or they don't have a lot of content or something like this. That works. For other folks, search is a big important piece, and they need that to be working as soon as that farm comes online. And so you need to just do a backup of that service application. So what I've done for those kind of customers is I've just done a service app backup of search. So, backup SP farm, blah, 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 from PowerShell, and then save that backup to some place that's also replicated over to the recovery farm. And then when this comes online, you can restore that service app. It'll restore the databases, restore the index, and things like that. And so again, all the service apps are different. You need to figure that out. So in the chat room, they're talking about some stuff about DNS servers. Obviously, in order for DNS to work, you've got to have it not be in the data center that's failed. This may or may not, depending on the type of site this is, this DNS may be the same as your Active Directory, the Active Directory that your service accounts are logging in and all that. But if this is a public site like my blog, where people aren't necessarily logging in, DNS could be uncoupled from that. So DNS could be running at your host provider, your registrar, or something like that. So that's something that you need to have a good hand on. If you're the DNS that you're using is internal DNS and AD DNS, then in order for your recovery farm to work, you got to have AD and DNS there anyway. So you've already got a backup copy, so you should be able to get in and make those changes. But Sam's blog post does a good job of kind of talking about how to set stuff up, showing where some things are at. I kind of liked it. He walked it through. Again, there's a million weeds he could have gotten into. And that's one of those things, people in the chat room have been talking about how they do a disaster recovery drills once a year, once a quarter, something like that. That's where you find out where these weeds are. That's where you find out the things that you need to know, like, oh my goodness, how do we get the user profile service to work? Well, that's one of the things. The first time you do that drill, you figure that out. He also has a bit. The second step of this blog post is on solutions, and that's another thing. So anything that you install in your production farm, be it a solution, whatever, you need to make those same changes on your recovery farm. This includes web config changes, like for blob cache settings, any of that kind of stuff you need to make sure that you do in your recovery farm. So Sam did a good job with that. To kind of get those juices flowing. I like that. It was a good article. I still might write something up on it because I do have this discussion all the time. So it's something that it's a well-worn conversation. But thanks to Sam for that. A related topic that I read last week that I enjoyed very much. If you're not reading Victor Weiland's blog, shame on you. It's at victorweiland.se. Be in the chat notes and hopefully on the bottom of the screen here. But he is doing a blog series now on the workflow manager and some disaster recovery stuff. And this is also good stuff. If you've got SharePoint 2013 and you're using the SharePoint 2013 workflows, you need to have something in place to store that stuff. And so Victor does a tremendous job of talking about the pieces involved. For those of you, how many of you know, show of hands, how many databases, what the minimum number of databases you have with the workflow manager are? Anybody? Show of hands. How many of you people out there said 5? You were wrong. It's 6. You have 6 databases at least when you're using the workflow manager. That's 3 for Service Bus, 3 for the workflow manager itself, and a bunch of other stuff. So this first blog post that Victor's got talks about kind of what things to consider, ways to do it. He talks about the always on availability groups, things like that. We've got some great guesses on the number of databases in the chat room. The chat room is got a 10-second-ish delay. We got some good guesses on the On the number of databases, somebody guessed yellow. I don't even know what to make of that. But this is a good blog post. If you've got the workflow manager, then you need to make sure that you know how to back it up and kind of what the pieces are. And so that's a good thing. And it looks like he hasn't published the rest of the series yet. I hope for Victor's sake, and Victor, he's a good egg. He's way smarter than me. I'm sure he's figured this out. But you need to, whenever you've got one of these multi-part series, don't publish the first part until you've written all the parts, or you will never finish them. It's just how it happens. It's one of the rules of the internet. I'm sure of it. Another little gem that Victor talks about in this, and it's kind of common knowledge, sort of, but in order to have highly available workflow manager on the compute side, so the server side, obviously one's not highly available. Turns out 2 is not highly available. 3 is highly available. 4 is not highly available. So on the compute side of this, you have to have exactly 3 servers to be highly available. And it has to do with a quorum thing and, machines voting each other off the farm and stuff like that. But it's workflow manager disaster recovery is not as simple as it feels like it should be. So Victor's blog post will take care of that. So read his stuff, subscribe to his thing. He's got the RSS feed, all that crazy business. So this was a fun one last week, and then ironically I also got an email about this today, so it's very timely blog post. Had a customer last week that wanted to change some service accounts, and while this isn't exactly what my blog post was about, a couple of years ago I published a blog post on changing the service account passwords for SharePoint 2010. And turns out the SharePoint 2013 process is pretty similar, in most cases very similar. And so while that wasn't exactly what the customer was doing, because they were actually changing the accounts, not the passwords for existing accounts, it sort of filled in the gaps on where all the pieces were for them. And that blog post is one of my prouder blog posts because it is a very thorough blog post, because I show you, I have all the different types of accounts. So we've got, content crawl accounts, service apps, farm accounts, all that kind of crazy stuff, all the different kinds of accounts, how to change the password, and then how to check to make sure that it actually worked. So I put a lot of love into that blog post. But it's important to know how to test all that, because as our customer found out last week, when you've got multiple machines in your farm, it gets very complicated once you start changing accounts and changing passwords, especially things that end up running on the machine side, like IIS app pool accounts, or heaven forbid the farm account. We actually changed the farm account on their farm, not changed the password on the existing farm account. We had account A, and we decided, we don't want account A to be the farm account anymore. We made account B the farm account. And the customer was pretty sure everything was going to explode. The person I was working with was pretty sure everything was going to explode, but it ended up working pretty well. And so that sort of dovetails into our disaster recovery thing. If you've got your 2 farms set up, you want to have your service accounts be the same. But if you didn't, you can go through and change them. You can leave your recovery farm built, but just change it so that the service accounts match your production farm. But anyway, if you need to change any of those accounts or passwords or whatever, read that blog post, kind of read through it. Again, it's not exactly the thing that we were talking about, but it's close enough. It's going to get you thinking the right way and talking about that. And it also is good, a very cautionary tale about not throwing burritos at your boss. That gets so many SharePoint administrators fired. I don't know what it is about SharePoint folks and launching burritos at people. I don't know what it is. Something about this job brings out the burrito thrower in us. I don't get it. But another thing that was related to that was when they created their accounts, like good SharePoint admins, they had to change their, had to create the new managed accounts and all that, and they were using PowerShell because they're cool. That's what cool people do. They use PowerShell. And many of the passwords for these accounts had special characters in them. So we kind of had to review the whole how you handle special characters in PowerShell bit, because it was just doing all kinds of crazy business and all that. And so this is just kind of a refresher. For PowerShell, the escape character is the backtick. So on American keyboards, it's to the left of the one, it's underneath the tilde. That is the escape character for PowerShell. So if you've got a password for your service account and it's got some brackets or, double quotes or whatever in it, fret not. It's all good. We can keep that password. The hackers will hate it. You'll hate it when you type it, but the hackers will hate it too. But when you're doing your whole, creating your account and creating your managed account and putting that in PowerShell, you just have to put that single backtick in PowerShell. Now, when I was doing this with the user or with a customer, we just practiced. That's all we did. So we did password equal, double quotes. We put their password in, hit OK, and then just echoed it back out to make sure it matched. It didn't because of the special character, so we up arrowed, put the ticks in, that kind of stuff till we got it working fine. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to step through it. Set the variable name and then just echo it back out to the host. Make sure that it looks good. That's all we did. In the chat room, they're thinking about having some competitive burrito throwing, air burrito throwing. I see there's a lot of that going on. Teresa says she throws like a girl. The good news, Teresa, is that you are a girl, so that all, sounds like it works the way it's supposed to. Looks like Meryl's going to ditch out here quick and run to Taco Bell. I'm a little jealous because we don't have a Taco Bell here named, and I don't mind me some Taco Bell every once in a while. So that's, I'm jealous of you folks able to leave this thing. I would leave this if I could sometimes. And I've got a couple of PowerShell blog posts in the hopper that I just haven't finished up yet, but maybe I'll do one about this backtick thing just so I can get that out there. Because I know that if I haven't dealt with it in a couple of months, the first time it comes up again, I'm like, oh, is it the backslash or the so I might just put that out there so I can have it for me. You'll find a lot of times my blog posts are less about what's helpful for you guys out there, but more about me just forgetting something for the 900th time and putting it in my blog so I can find it. And then talking about it on my Netcast so that I can search for it in OneNote. But that's out there. So remember the backtick. Speaking of my blog, I posted what is one of my favorite blog posts ever this week. And this is something I have whined and complained and kvetched about this thing for years, this particular problem. And as far as I know, the solution to this problem has been under my cursor the entire time, and I just didn't know it. So I've talked about this in the past, how I use OneNote for everything. We talked about here last week about how now you can email things directly to OneNote. I've been doing that like a champ, loving emailing things to OneNote. If you haven't seen that yet, go back and listen to Netcast 193, or at least look at the notes for 193 and see how you can do that. The week before, we talked about how OneNote is free, so you no longer have an excuse to not use OneNote. It's out there, and you're like, but Todd, I'm on a Mac, I can't. OneNote's out there for the Mac. It's all there. Everybody can use OneNote. No excuses. So I've been using OneNote for years, literally years. The very first week that I did my very first Netcast 5+ years ago, all my notes were in OneNote. I've been using it forever. But one of my complaints was when you add a page, and the pages are the, well, I guess for you guys over here, the pages are the things that go down the right-hand side. When you click the Add Page button on the top right, it puts your new page at the bottom. And there's no way to configure where the new page goes, and no matter what you name that new page, it stays at the bottom. What I've been yearning for, what I thought I needed, was an option to right-click and say, like, alphabetize my pages, something like that. But instead, like a sucker, I've been, for 5 years or more, been adding a new page, scrolling all the way down, cussing like a sailor the whole time, scroll all the way down, grab my new page, and then drag it all the way back up to the top so that when I do my Netcast the next week, It's in there. So I've been doing that for years, and I've created different workbooks so that it's just been a horrible thing. And then this weekend, I was working on one of these blog posts that I will likely never publish, and my mouse I bumped it or something, and it was sitting over there, and it gave me this little symbol that was like the little page symbol, but it had a plus sign next to it. It was like an arrow, and it sort of blinked, and I'm like, I wonder what that button does, and I clicked it, and it put a page right there. Not at the bottom. It put a page wherever I wanted the page. So now, when I start the notes for Netcast 195, I will just have my little cursor dealie right above 194, click it, and it'll show up right where I want it to be. No more cussing at OneNote because I can't alphabetize my pages. So I don't know how long that's been in there. I can only assume that OneNote 1.0 had it, and I just never noticed it. But it's great. So, but again, I use OneNote for everything, and this just makes me fall in love with OneNote all over again. And I fell in love with OneNote all over again last week when I found out about the email thing. That's pretty great too. So, and so Kim's got my back. Kim and Lori both in the chat room have my back, because Jared's being a big meanie, and he's like, Todd, I can't believe you're that dumb. How did you know that wasn't in there? I wish you were never born. Glad to see they got my back. So that's great. So I just find myself using OneNote for everything now. I'll be sitting there looking at stuff on my phone. I'm like, I need to read this article. Email to OneNote. Oh, loving it. Good stuff all over. So read that blog post and marvel in how cool OneNote is. And so a couple more things here before we leave. For those of you that are basking in the luscious glow of Windows Phone 8, we got some good news last week, and that good news is that Windows Phone 8.1 is done. It's finished. The folks at Microsoft looked at it and said, it just can't get more perfecter than this. It's all done. Windows Phone 8.1 is finished. They've pushed it off to the manufacturers and things like that, and so that's ready to go. When that makes it out to our carriers, when we get it on our Lumias, things like that, that's always a question, right? We just never know. It was good to see that Verizon now has the icon. That they've got a couple of phones out. AT&T's got a bunch. They got the 920, the 1020, the 1520, all that kind of stuff. So glad to see the Windows phones kicking in. But Windows Phone 8.1 is close to being done, and it looks like Lori Gallant. So Lori would know. She works for Microsoft. She said the technical term is more perfecter. So that's good. So, but you're probably asking yourself, what is so exciting about Windows Phone 8.1? Well, number one, it's Windows Phone 8.1, so that's just cool. But there's a whole list of stuff at WP Central that talks about all the features that they've got in there. Now, Microsoft has not released any of this. They've not announced any of it. But the SDK leaked out, the software development kit. And so basically people have just been pouring through the SDK looking for calls to things to figure out what's actually in it. And so there's going to be things now we'll be able to install apps on our SD cards. So if you've got like a Nokia 520 that's got an SD card, you'll be able to install apps to that now, save some precious space on your phone. You can do that. There are some new social things. I'm not sure if I like how that's all worked out. Looks like they've uncoupled some of the social stuff, but there's all that. They've added support for Google Calendars. The weather now is going to be in your calendar, which is going to be kind of cool. The camera has some new stuff, but it looks like the new stuff, like the burst mode and all that, is things that us Nokia users have already been enjoying. So we'll see if what that looks like. The browser has been updated. Internet Explorer 11 is now going to be in there, so that's going to be nice. We can enjoy Internet Explorer 11. And just all kinds of great things. A new notification center, things like that. So check out that window, the WP Central blog post. Kind of walks through all of it. Built-in VPN access. SharePoint Tim asks a good question. Will it work with my Pebble? So for those of you that aren't geeks like Tim and I, apparently, the Pebble is one of those smartwatches that everybody's been talking about, and you run an app on your iPhone or your Android device. It talks to the Pebble, and the Pebble does all kinds of crazy things. I would love a Pebble, especially now they've got the metal pebbles. I'm not big on the plastic watches. Nothing against them, they're just not for me. I'm more about the metal watches. So I know that the Pebble recently came out with one, but one of the problems that the Pebble has had is that they couldn't do everything with Windows Phone. Now, I think there is a beta Windows Phone app out there for the Pebble, but I don't think it's full featured. And part of the reason for that is kind of a good thing, in that the Windows Phone 8 team decided that there are certain things that apps can never get access to, and it's a security thing. So one of them is an app can never get into your text messages. So there's no way that some virus app is going to go in there and start sending out messages, things like that, or reading your messages and send them to a central server. That's a good thing. But the bad thing is you can't get a Pebble app that can go in there and take your text messages and send them to your Pebble phone. So the Pebble experience hasn't been great on the Windows Phone. So Tim is asking if that's been fixed. I don't know. I haven't looked through for that specific question or not. We'll see. Build starts this week in San Francisco. That's Microsoft's developer thing. Maybe, Apple's rumored to be having a smartwatch come out. Pebble's got one. Samsung's got one. Maybe the time is now for like a Nokia smartwatch or something. And if that's the case, then hopefully there'll be some good Windows Phone software that includes that. But I hope so. I would love to have the option of wearing a smartwatch. Now I've got, I don't want to get into a lot about this, but I wear a Tissot watch here. And what I like about this Tissot watch, because I can't not be a geek, this watch actually has a touch screen. So when and I don't know if I can get this working here. So I can, to go through the features and things like that, like the altimeter and the thermometer and stuff like that, you actually touch the screen to do that. So it's kind of cool. So it's a fancy watch, but it's got the geek charm that I need. So I would definitely enjoy something like a Pebble or something like that. All right. So that's going to be out there. I'm very excited about that. Hopefully Nokia will find a way to get us the bits early, like they did with the blue updates and all the black updates and all that kind of stuff. But stay tuned here as I get more information about that. I will tell you. The last thing that I wanted to talk about has nothing to do with nothing, but a bunch of you folks I know because I talk to you on Twitter. And so this is something that came out, and I'm like, who probably would care about this? The people that I talk to on Monday nights. So one of my pet peeves, and Lord knows the list of things that irritate me is as long as both of my arms and longer than but one of the things that I hate is automated tweets. I don't want to get any tweet that a human being didn't sit down and type and hit enter and have it show up in TweetDeck. Now, I realize I'm the minority on that, and I'm fine with that. And for the most part, all of those automated tweets, they've got some kind of a hashtag, or they've got some kind of an account, a program that I can filter on, and I just filter them out. I don't care about them. But I don't like automated tweets. And one of the things that's been coming up over the last couple of weeks is, Twitter's anniversary came out and all that. And there's some Twitter app that you can install that tells you when your first tweet was or something. So I've been getting a bunch of these stupid automated tweets when people show up, they turn that on, they add that app to see what their first tweet was, and then it tweets out from their account, hey, I'm a dummy and I did the thing and you can click here and add this too. So anyway, I hate that. Filtered them out. But it did get me, thinking about, how long I've been on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So I went out and did some looking around, and you can go on Twitter, you can go into your settings, your little cog, the settings, and about halfway down on the settings page for your Twitter account, there's a button you can click and they will send you your archive. And it includes every tweet you've ever sent, and it comes bundled in like this cool little web page. So you just unzip it and you double click the web page, and you can filter out, and you can see every month that you've been in Twitter. It'll tell you how many tweets you sent that month. You can go to individual tweets, the first tweet, last tweet. It is super cool. So I was able to go back and see what my first tweet was and when it was and all that, and I was able to do all of that without annoying anybody else in the Twitterverse. So that was what I really liked about it, was that I could get that information without sending out that automated tweet. So if you're curious about, when you've tweeted specific things or what your first tweets were or any of that kind of stuff, you just go into your Twitter account and just click that little thing, request your archive, and it'll show up. It's an itty-bitty little thing. And so, yeah, Lynn in the chat room, her and I were at NMX together, and the guy, Scott, whoever that does the unmarketing thing, so Google Unmarketing, that's the guy. He did one of the keynotes. He said that automated tweets and automated social networking would be the downfall of social networking. I agree 100%. And this is one of those cases where if I do a good job rendering this out, I'll put the picture of him and I, because I went and got his autograph, and I'll put that in here. But I agree. But I guess the thing is, unlike him, I don't want to outlaw him. I don't want to ban him. I don't want people to stop using him. Because Kim was talking about here in the chat room how she loves automated tweets for doing things and all that kind of stuff. They have their use. I just don't like them. So as long as, they're tagged some way that I can filter them out. Like one of the things that people have been doing is the whole in case you missed it thing. So ICYMI. So they tweet the same thing multiple times to get multiple time zones and all that, but they put the ICYMI in it. That's awesome. I just filter out ICYMI. Perfect. The people that want them can have them. The people that love them can love them, and it's awesome. So, but I thought I would share that. So good. Yeah, and so for those of you, because now everybody's in the chat room, they're like, oh, those are horrible, I hate that. I use TweetDeck, and if you go to settings, mute, you can mute out anything, mute out ICYMI, and you're good to go. And all the people that love them can still love them, and I can go on hating them. Good stuff. Okay, so my recording window froze up again, so I don't know how long I've been going. At least 33 minutes and 48 seconds. Probably more. But we'll go to the shameless self-promotion part. So here in a month from now, SP TechCon will be all over. And, but that's April 22nd through the 25th. You can go out to sptechcon.com, sign up for it. Come hang out with me. We're going to be doing stuff. I'm still working on how to do the Netcast live from our San Francisco office. But again, if you're going to be at SP TechCon or you're just going to be in San Francisco the week of the 22nd, hit me up, and I will keep in touch and let you know how we're going to do the live thing. But I'm working with those guys. We're going to get it figured out, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. But then we're doing a 3-hour upgrade session, and we're doing some admin stuff, and we're going to just be going out there ruining people's time. So that's going to be out there. So the next thing, I will be there in May at Tech Ed in Houston. So we're going to be down there. Tech Ed 2014. Going to be doing a pre-con on installing SharePoint. That's going to be May 11th, I believe. I forgot to submit any sessions, so I didn't get any sessions. So there's that, but I will be doing the pre-con and then hanging out and just going to Hyper-V sessions and all kinds of other stuff. Just kind of keeping myself busy. June, no tech conferences yet. July, that's when I make my big trip. So we still have John Liu in the chat room there. I'm going to be going down to Australia and New Zealand for the Sharing the Point conferences down there. So I'll be in Sydney July 15th and 16th. July 16th is my parents' anniversary, if you want to send them anything. A few months to shop for that. And then July 22nd and 23rd, I will be in Auckland for the New Zealand version of that. So looks like this week, I was talking to Mark Rhodes last week about that. Looks like the sessions that I'll be doing are the much beloved Visual Studio, the load testing with Visual Studio session, and also using PowerShell with SharePoint Online. So good times. Now, the sessions down there are only 60 minutes. For those of you that went to the load testing with Visual Studio session at SharePoint conference, that was 75 minutes, and we ran out of time as it was. So I'm probably going to record my demos for that. Number one, that'll keep any amateur comedians in the audience from making me look even dumber than I already look while I'm up on stage. But I'll be able to do my demos, not lose track, and then if there's any demos that I don't get to, they'll be out there. People will be able to download them, stuff like that. For me, I I feel like recorded demos are kind of phony, kind of cheating, but I've done it for a couple of conferences and nobody's ever minded. So I will continue to think that I'm the minority when it comes to that, and continue to record them and let people watch them, things like that. And it does help keep me on target. So that is in July, and might have a couple other things coming up later in the year. Kind of stay tuned for that. But I've got a couple more conferences. I'm doing some begging and seeing if some folks will let me come over. So stay tuned for that. So thanks, everybody. The chat room, you guys were great this week. I appreciate all had some new faces in there. A couple of them have left already. Surprised they lasted as long as they did, honestly. If you're in the chat room, stick around. I'll be here for a while, so no need to run off. If you are annoyed by all the references to the folks in the chat room and hate hearing me call other people's names out, there's a great way to fix it. Watch this thing live. I record it Monday nights at 8:30 Central Time in the U.S. You can go to www.toddklindt.com/netcast. Watch the video live, or there's instructions on how to pop it out. Join in the chat room. Get in here and heckle me with the best of them here. These guys have a lot of experience with that, but I think you'll fit right in, and then you can get in and join the crazy chat fun too. So thanks to everybody. As far as I know, there will be a chat, or there'll be a Netcast next week. So thanks to everybody. Those of you that have emailed me this week with like questions about the service accounts and all that, I appreciate that. Keep that up. You can hit me up at todd.klindt@rackspace.com or on Twitter at toddklindt. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. Have a good night, and I'll see you next week.